This podcast is part of the Game and Entertainment Network. Visit tgenetwork.net to find the latest episodes from all our shows.
It's time for AggroChat, the official podcast of the Tales of the Agronaut blog and stalwart gaming community, where we talk about stuff and things, and the stuff about the things, and sometimes gaming. I'm Belgast, and let's start the show. Hey folks, it's that time again. Time for another episode of AggroChat. This is episode 176. Tonight I'm joined by Ashgar.
Hello.
Grace.
Hello.
Kodra.
Howdy.
And Tam.
Hello.
So tonight we are a little bit late in recording our Horizon Zero Dawn show, but, timing and reasons. This was Kodra's pick. Kodra, Tell us why you picked this game.
Because I really wanted to force myself to finish it, and I knew everyone else everyone else already had it, and most of us had finished it, and I wanted to talk about it.
That's a good plan.
So this game's great.
It is an amazing game. Okay, so just a rundown. Ash, I think you're the only one of us that hadn't beaten the game, or hasn't beaten the game.
I did not finish the game, no.
I was not sure if I would, because I was kind of, earlier today, rushing towards the end, because there gets to a point at the very end where you're like, am I getting close? Am I getting close? And I think, Ash, you're in that phase right now.
I am. I feel like if I had gotten to this part earlier, I might have actually finished. I kind of stalled out a little earlier.
If you had gotten to the big reveal.
Even, prior to that.
So, fair warning, with all Game of the Month shows, this is going to be a spoilery episode. And that's very relevant for Horizon Zero Dawn, because I think there are actually some really, really good reveals in this game.
There's some really interesting things that are huge spoilers, yes.
I mean, the game definitely took some turns that I wasn't quite expecting at several points during the game.
This game consistently surprised me, and that's really rare for me in a game.
I mean, first off, I want to say, having played through the game, this is some of the most interesting science fiction that I have experienced in a really long time.
Yeah, in any kind of media.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. Book, movie, radio drama, whatever. And the thing is it also at the same time feels intelligent about it. There's some hand waving that goes on, but they have reasons for everything.
Yeah, and some of the reveals are also just there's a lot of social commentary going on in this game that I just love.
So I feel like at the starting level, for anyone who may be listening to this show and hasn't played it, and you probably shouldn't do that, but you start off as Aloy,
Kid Aloy.
Kid Aloy. That is basically this orphan child that was handed off to this man named Ross to raise. And that whole sequence is weird because, Rost is basically me in every other game. I am Rost. That is the character I normally play. But instead, I'm playing Aloy. And Aloy is being raised as an exile in amongst these weird people called the Nora, which are I don't know, Luddites to some extent.
They're very religious.
They're scared of technology.
They are very religious. They are very respectful of the land. I don't think that they are. It's interesting. Fearful of technology. They don't have a problem harvesting robots.
I think that's slightly. I don't know. Because the whole harvesting of robots and making weapons out of robotic parts feels different than messing with the technology of the old ones.
Yes.
Yes.
Sure.
They're harvesting them the way they would the animals that are around. They're
Yes.
not really
Identically.
using the technology in any way.
And just like you would use every part of an animal kill, they use every part of a robot dinosaur kill. Truthfully, they're not dinosaurs, but whatever.
They have.
Some of them are.
They have a specific sacred land, and it is verboten for them to travel outside of it. And they have very specific laws that are passed down by the matriarchy, a council of matriarchs, and it's very rigid and honor driven and superstitious. Like everything gets filtered through a layer of superstition with them, which is very fun because Aloy is completely opposed to that.
She was raised outside of it.
She was raised outside of it, but I mean, she cottons on. I love Aloy.
There are several lines where it becomes clear that she is paying a lot more attention than anyone gives her credit for.
I love Aloy.
Aloy is one
so
of my
much.
favorite protagonists in a very long time.
Aloy is amazing.
Aloy is one of my favorite protagonists. Full stop.
Aloy figured some things out before I did, and when she said them, I'm like, oh, I see. She is incredibly smart.
Oh my god. So like this jumps a lot ahead, but one of my favorite lines in the game is this guy is being patronizing to her and like, now you know that the world isn't flat. Well, I knew it was round all along. You can tell that by observing the shadow at such and such and such.
You can tell that by observing shadows during an eclipse. They're round, they wouldn't be round if the Earth was flat.
Yeah, it's the greatest thing ever.
Yeah. No, Aloy is super smart, and I love that.
The hook for me in this game is the Nora worship the All-Mother. And the All-Mother is this religious figure that they constantly talk about, praise to the All-Mother, guidance of the All-Mother. And after the first chapter of the game, you are taken into the mountain, which is another sacred part of the Nora tribe, and you are introduced to the All-Mother, who is
actually real,
which is a door. And you stand in front of the door, and it scans Aloy, and it, like, identifies her, like, it does a biometric scan of her, and then is like, this is a scan match, but my alpha registry's been corrupted. And she realizes that this robot door is what everyone is worshipping as the All-Mother, and is like, oh, this is some nonsense. And so she has to, like, filter everything they say through, and, like, because the alpha registry file was corrupted, she is here to heal the corruption in the land.
Yeah, her being raised as an outcast and not ever having been given a good reason for this means that she constantly questions everything everyone tells her, which is great. Because it means that then she's in a position to say, wait a second, why is this happening? Okay, I understand why this is happening, even if nobody else is thinking about it.
Well, and it doesn't hurt that she finds this device when she falls down in a cave when she's very, very young, called a focus, which is, Google Glass on crack.
It's her game UI for the most part, but it is specifically an old wearable technology that projects holographic images and data, and like allows her to read all of this old one technology. Okay, so I want to talk about another thing this game did, and this is the first time in a really, really long time that this game has done this for me. This game gave me space to not care about the main story quest.
Stuff is important,
and there
but it
we
will
come
wait.
to a difference.
Interesting.
With
Okay.
my problems with the game in general.
Oh.
Turns out I care a lot about the story quest, but it took me a very, very, very long time to get to it.
So I bounced off hard of Oblivion, Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion, because I felt the narrative of the story was pushing me down the main story quest with an urgency that I couldn't ignore. Everything that the main story quest was telling me to do was more important than me just going out and enjoying the world of the Elder Scrolls 4. And I always compared it to the game that came right before it, Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind, which at the very beginning of the game, the main story quest comes to a stop and is like, you should go out into the world and do a bunch of side quests, and after you've done enough side quests, we'll let you progress on the main story quest, so that you can get hooked into the rest of these side quests in the world. And this game does it in a beautiful way, because the people giving you the main story quest, Aloy openly questions them. Like, in her dialogue, she's like, yeah, you tell me that I need to go heal this corrupted land, but I know that that's not actually what the computer was saying, so I'll just go do whatever I want to do.
So
Well, and it puts her. Go ahead, Tam.
I don't know if if this is the same thing that Ash will have, but for me, it took me a really long time to care about anything going on in the game. It introduced me to a bunch of characters I mostly didn't like, except for Aloy. It introduced me to a world that didn't seem like it was doing anything interesting, and it just took a really long time to let me know that it was actually doing interesting stuff. And so, like, I actually checked out of this for a month the first time I played it, because I was like, I mean, it's interesting, and, like, fighting Dinobots is sort of fun, but
my problem is that fighting Dinobots is only sort of fun. Like, it's fun, and then I've done it a bunch of times, and it's kind of rote.
Yep.
And then cleaning out bandit camps is kind of rote. The cauldron stayed interesting, but there aren't that many of those.
And I think I think my takeaway from all of that is I don't actually like open world games.
I'm also coming to this conclusion because this game that is really awesome in a lot of ways, I just got bored with. I got bored with the open world parts of it.
I don't know. Like, I mean, I hadn't really made a lot of progress until I forced myself to make progress for the sake of this show. And to some extent, like, it was miserable at the start. Like, forcing myself to care about the story quest was just, it was horrible. And then it hooked me, and I got hooked, and I stayed hooked. But I think I was like level 20 and had never actually been to Meridian. So, like, I spent most of my time wandering around and, you know, clearing bandit camps and, you know, taking out dinosaurs and crafting interesting things. And
I mean, I liked the combat. I liked fighting robot dinosaurs. And so I was pretty much completely hooked by the time that I left the Embrace. But I also, like, and playing through it a second time, even though I didn't finish the entire playthrough, I appreciate even more that the game, like, it doesn't force you ahead, and it doesn't seem to throttle you. Like, you can choose to just follow the story quests, or you can wander off as much as you want, and there's plenty to wander off and do.
Yes.
And it doesn't limit you or say, except in, like, a couple of small places that I can think of, one in particular, it mostly doesn't make you go do that other stuff to progress the main story.
Yes. That was a huge thing that made me like it was when I got hooked by the story, and it totally happened. When I got hooked by the story, I blazed through it and did not care about anything else. And I loved it.
That
was an incredibly great experience.
I'm looking forward to going back and doing the things that I feel like I robbed myself of by focusing on the story.
Yeah, and I mean, when I played through it, like, I was so hooked that I basically got about as far as Meridian the first time, and then I wandered the entire world, scouring it for every possible side quest, cauldron, tall neck, whatever, and did everything else before progressing the story. And so it was kind of weird because when I was getting to the end, I was motoring through from plot point to plot point. And I'm glad that I did it that way because I wanted, like you said, I was so hooked on the story once it started really taking off that I didn't want to do the side stuff at that point anyway.
And I guess to some extent, like, I had prepared myself to do a push because by the time I got to Meridian, I had enough shards and other craftables to buy, like, purple everything. And then from that point on, I just had, like, nice weapons. I feel like one of the interesting things that happens because of the way that Aloy is set up is she acts in this role of the perennial outsider. Like, it doesn't matter who she's encountering, she's always going to be the outsider, which allows her a lot more leverage to move around and and take options that maybe the super stratified tribal structures wouldn't allow them to take. I mean, I felt like I could blend into the world more depending on where I was going.
That's interesting because she's also constantly frustrated by Silence because he's also completely set apart from the world. And, like, those are two sides of a coin and two, in many ways, opposites, because Aloy wants to be part of the world and Silence, for the most part, enjoys his self-imposed exile.
Yeah. Silence is basically asshole Yoda. I mean, really, that's how I thought of him the entire game. It's like, oh, it's asshole Yoda. Because he seems to know all the things we want to know before we know them, but will only spoon feed them to us.
Well, but that's his MO. That's how he behaved with Hades, too.
Yep. And also, he doesn't necessarily know all the things because he needs us to open all the doors for him.
And I love the fact that Aloy is constantly pointing that out.
Yeah.
That was another thing where the game gave me space to, like, when you go to Sunfall and there's the emperor, the, like, child emperor and his mother, and, like, Vanasha is whispering to you about how she wants your help to, like, set them free or something, or to find the man who is being hunted. Silence chimes in and is like, this is a distraction, we don't have time for this, and Aloy quickly is like, we have time if I say we have time.
You're just along for the ride.
Yeah, it's like, it's not like you can tell me what to do. You have no control here.
Okay, so question, is there anyone that didn't do that side quest?
I did not.
Okay, I'm curious what some of the later events ended up like. Because I feel like that sequence is rather important.
I feel like a more important sequence is uncovering Ursa's fate.
Yeah. And that had, like, multiple good, like, story payoff moments. Man, I know I've said this before, but can I just, like, talk for a second again about how ridiculously, like, amazing it felt to see, like, oh, there's this person in authority acting like a dumbass and hitting on Aloy, and A, first she puts him in his place, and B, later when she comes back, he's like, oh my god, I am so sorry for that. That was really dumb.
Yes.
And, like, how amazing it was to just have that be a thing that happened, because that never happened.
And she was like, okay, as long as you never ever do it again.
Yep.
Like, learn from what you did, never do it again, and I'll accept your apology. I love Aloy.
I also, like, I really love this game for the fact that there are multiple people that you meet along the way that in some other game could have been a romantic interest for Aloy. And Aloy does not have time for that shit. Like, it just makes me so happy. As much as I enjoy a good BioWare game, it's kind of nice to be like, look, I'm saving the world here. Can we just not do this right now?
Well, Aloy does not have time for anybody's crap.
I mean,
Regardless of the flavor or the time, she does not have time for it.
she was on a very personal journey, though. Like, she was looking for, like, information about where she came from, who was her mother, and ultimately finds it out. And I will admit I cried in the ending.
I cried so much.
Yeah, I teared up a lot.
Oh my god!
And not just the ending. Like, there were several moments. Kind of. So the character that I hated at the first that really grew on me was Erend.
Yep.
Like,
I mean, it's another.
Erend.
There's another instance there, though, where you meet him and you're like, oh god, it's this guy. He's gonna be an ass. And then
he's the horrible dude, bro.
Yeah, and he actually, I mean, he's got some issues, but he's okay.
And, like, it was awesome to see him, like, step up after the death of his sister. Like, because
guy, yeah, okay.
Because, like, when you encounter him towards the end of the game, like he's the leader of the vanguard. Like he's stepped up. Like he's whipped his forces into shape.
Yeah, he goes from being like a mopey alcoholic to a legitimate badass, and it's really cool to see. Well, and I also like that. I like that he does it. I like that he does it on his own merits. Like it isn't because Aloy swoops in and saves him from himself.
Right. Like Aloy swoops in and like helps him find the truth of what happened, and once or twice she's like, get a grip on yourself, but that's about the extent of it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really what his
Aloy
sister said that like turned him around.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like Aloy isn't like the manic pixie dream girl trope in that relationship, which is great because it's a really tired trope.
Well, and for the most part, like they're just, comrades in arms. Like they're battle buds and not really much more.
Well, and there's this great moment at the end of the game where Aaron is just like, when I met you, I just thought you were some pretty girl in the middle of nowhere, and I was a big shot, and it turned out that, like, I was just lucky that you gave me the time of day at all.
That's not even the end of the game. That's as soon as you save Meridian.
Is it?
He definitely comes into his own when you... So, I'm curious, because I'm curious who all helps you at the end of the game, depending on what side quests you do.
So I know that because I was watching a video of someone else's playthrough today, and they were missing, I can't think of her name, the hawk, right? Like from the Hunter's Lodge.
Okay, I was missing her.
Like, that was a great series of quests also, and I know a bunch of people skip those, but I'd suggest going back and doing them.
I definitely, as soon as I see a quest chain that's like, go hunting in any game, I'm like, no, I'm out.
But I think you only have to do, like, 2 or 3, maybe, of them to unlock it, and then once you've unlocked it, then you can kind of just do the quest chain, and it's an actual quest chain. It's not just, oh, now go back and do more of those.
I'm doing it right now, and I am on a kill a Thunderbird and kill a Thunderjaw and kill a, what's the giant bird?
Stormbird,
yeah.
Yeah, I ended up
I hate those things.
With Varl and Sona and Teb, and then
what? You can fight with Teb?
Well, he plays a support role.
But, like, in the last fight against the giant destroyer.
No. Up top of in the spire? No, he's defending the ridge.
Right. Yeah. No, but that's my question, is who all's in that fight in the spire?
Aaron, Varl, and... I had Aaron, Varl, and the
Sona.
I had her...
The Hawk?
The Hawk.
Tanesha?
Maybe. I can't remember her name.
Yeah, I had Aaron, Varl, and Sona.
Talana. Yep. But yeah, like, because it's possible to not do Sona's side quest.
I guess that's true.
Really?
Like,
yep.
You could go straight to Meridian.
I definitely did that.
Oh man, that was an awesome quest chain.
I
really liked that quest chain.
I went back and did it after going to Meridian, but
basically, like, I'm concerned of stuff that I missed after Meridian, because when I sat down to purposefully try and beat the game, I had just arrived at Meridian when I last played, and then from that point on, I kind of focused on only things that absolutely looked like they would be super important. There's a lot of beasts that are really annoying to fight. I just gotta say.
I feel like eventually you get... This game doesn't necessarily message all of its systems very well. Eventually you get a pretty good idea. There's enough tools to fight each beast that they stop being as miserable.
I feel like Stormbirds are always miserable.
Stormbirds are always miserable.
But you can tie them down, and then they are slightly less miserable.
Like Glint
First
Hawks.
time I encountered one, I only had the light rope caster. And it takes like 6 ropes to tie that one down. And after like 5, it'd break out.
Like Glint Hawks, I got really good at fighting, but I never got good at fighting Stormbirds.
the first time I fought a Stormbird, I realized it had things on its back, and I couldn't get it to get away from me or like down. So I lured it down and froze it and jumped on its back, and then it flew.
Interesting.
And this isn't a good place to be, in
Probably
case you're
not.
wondering. And so before it went down, I hit the things on its back, which are its fuel tanks, and with my spear. And so it plummeted into the water and set the water on electricity while I'm in it and died. And it killed me instantly. It was not my finest moment.
I mean, it sounded pretty epic up until that point.
It was
I feel like there is no plan that involves jumping on the back of a giant bird that ends well.
No, it really wasn't.
Like, Shadow of the Colossus can teach you this lesson if you so wish.
I tell you the thing that always was annoying to fight were the rock chewers or whatever the sandworm guys.
Yeah. So I have a story. You know the quest where it's like, hey, go to this quarry. There's a bunch of people that died. We don't know what happened. I was like, all right, I'll go check this out. None of these side quests have been that bad so far.
Nope.
I get in there. It auto-saves you. So I couldn't go back. And I did not have any herbs. And I had like 2 or 3 light potions.
Ouch. I didn't know it auto-saved you there.
I spent an hour fighting that guy.
It's a miserable encounter
But I can tell
if you're
you
not stalked.
But the thing, so I had the tear blast arrows at that point, and that's what saved my life.
Oh yeah, those tear arrows they're one of my favorite things in life.
Like
Tear
now
blast
that
arrows are great.
now that I'm thinking about it, like, can you drop bombs on the ground and have them come up in the bomb?
Oh yeah, that's how I killed the ones for the quest with the other sun prince.
Oh my god, that quest was hilarious because they're like, set up some traps. I was fully stocked with traps, so like I covered that valley in traps, like literally. Because at that point I had 8 of each type, and I deployed all of them.
So eventually, I solved almost all of my problems with fire because
Fire is pretty great.
Fire seems to be the most universally good ability.
I had the purple hunter's bow, and I had 3 purple plus fire enchants in it, and yeah, that's how I beat basically everything from that point on.
I just blew stuff up with bombs forever.
I hear that's probably a better answer.
That's also my answer.
Bombs are great.
Bombs are great. Sticky bombs are even better.
I wanted the freaking Rattler so bad, but holy shit, getting those skins is horrible. Like, in order to buy the purple Rattler, you have to have a rabbit skin, a turkey skin, and a fox skin.
Aww.
Do you know how many rabbits I have slaughtered and never seen a skin?
I have the Rattler. I've done this stupid thing. I know
Like,
exactly
I
how
did
many
that
rabbits.
thing too.
I even went back to Noralands because I thought, I think they had like more friendly critters for me to slaughter in there.
I had like a little place that was near one of the early bandit camps that was like, for the longest time, it was like my home base, and in between other quests and stuff, I would fast travel back there and just like wander around the woods and kill fuzzy animals for their stuff so that I could upgrade. And I think in the end I got almost everything upgraded. I think there's maybe one weapon that I didn't ammo pouch that I didn't fully upgrade. Like, I bought all of the things that were available to buy. Like, I did all of the stupid things. And then also I never used the Rattler.
Resources are always a problem, or the storage for resources for me. Because, I was constantly selling a stack of something so I could free up space so I could, keep looting stuff.
Yeah, I wish I had more inventory space for all the useless rocks and things that I picked up. I had so many stupid rocks, and you have to throw them to get rid of them. And so many of those, random boxes that you get
Yes.
had rocks in them, and then I couldn't open them or I couldn't get rid of them. Rocks made me really angry.
Or they'd have a potion in it, and you're full up on all potions. So you have to take a potion so you can finish looting the box so you can get it out of your inventory. I'm curious, like, what level did people finish the game at, like, character level?
I think 42.
I think I was actually 50. Like, I did everything before I finished the game.
Wow, okay, so this is shocking. I am actually under-leveled compared to y'all. I think I beat it at 35, 36, only because I pushed really hard to get there.
I was 30 coming out of the Zero Dawn facility, so that probably would hit the end at mid-30s, I want to say.
Probably. Because from where you're at right now, I think you have, like, 3 major events to fight through. And that was the other thing, like, towards the end, like, every step was, like, an hour-long thing that you had to go do. So, like, some of these took a serious time commitment, and there was no place to save in the middle of it.
So I kind of want to talk about the story and the mystery.
Yes, please.
Because this game sets you up pretty early on. You're interacting with this world, and you're seeing all of this really fancy sci-fi technology in this world that mostly treats it like magic, or not really like magic, but like these are the ancient
They're forbidden,
ones.
lost artifacts of the ancient ones.
They're lost artifacts of the ancient ones, and we don't go there. That's the Nora's take, and most everyone else's is we don't know what's going on. And you are then introduced to Silence, who is clearly at least somewhat in the know, and he starts taking you through.
It takes a long time for you to get introduced to Silence, by the way.
True. Well, depends on how quickly you're going through the main story.
He's at least halfway through.
Yeah, okay. But you start to piece together the story of the Ancient Ones. Because it's like, what happened to them? Why aren't they here? And the way it's presented is, eventually you discover that the Ancient Ones were basically us, our current era, a little bit in the future, and a company that specialized in robotics created a swarm of robots that they couldn't control, that fueled themselves with biofuel. Basically, all living life on Earth was being devoured by this swarm of robots. Way to go, Ted.
Ted
Screw
is
that guy.
the worst.
I hate that guy so much.
Ted never studied his sci-fi.
No, he didn't.
And it's hilarious that he makes a comment about that, too. It's like, none of us ever heeded the sci-fi warnings we've had over the years.
I want to say that datapad was somewhere in the Zero Dawn facility.
Possibly.
I don't think he was that insightful.
And so he has a brilliant researcher that basically did all of the work for him before
and then
she
blew
left.
him off, yeah.
Yeah, and then blew him off, named Elizabeth Sobek. And he brings her in when he has basically put humanity on a path to extinction, is like, I need you to stop this. Like, I need you to save me from my own mistakes. And begrudgingly, she comes up with a plan, and it's called Zero Dawn. And what you learn is that they need time to finish Zero Dawn so that they can save humanity, and to buy that time, humanity needs to go on a suicide mission against the machine swarm to buy them the weeks they need to complete Zero Dawn.
They basically, because at that point, all the wars are being fought by these robots, and now the robots have turned on them. So they're basically putting weapons in the hands of anyone who can hold them and sending them off against the robots to try to buy a little bit of time. Anytime.
And they sell it as this huge noble, you're gonna save humanity by buying this team the time to beat the robots. And it's called Operation Enduring Freedom or something like that, isn't it?
Yep. Operation Enduring Victory.
Yeah, there you go. so yeah, like it's this whole weird PR job, and like you find data pads from people that were like fighting in the resistance, and it's miserable. Like the stuff that they're dealing with is horrible. And the fact that like they're constantly dealing with the death of their friends that are also fighting alongside them because they're going up against these unstoppable killing machines.
And then you finally get under Sunfall to find out what Zero Dawn is, and it opens up with we are lying to everyone. There's no way to stop this extinction of humanity. And then of course Aloy's confused because she's living in a world where humanity clearly exists, and the entire point was coming up with a way to jumpstart humanity once the robots fed them, completely devoured all life on Earth.
And basically part of this premise is that like these robots have a deactivation code, but it's so encrypted that it's going to take X amount of time that we don't have to figure out the code. So the idea is everyone is going to die, but these, we're going to build these AIs and computers that will solve that code and deactivate the swarm, and then we're going to find a way to rebuild.
We're going to rebuild humanity. It's going to be Operation Zero Dawn. It's going to be led by the AI Gaia and a whole bunch of subroutines that are supposed to bring humanity back to where it was before the robot swarm happened. And this becomes, so you solve this mystery and are led to the next mystery of, wait a second, there's this entire part which is supposed to be transferring the knowledge of the ancient ones to the new humans. And that just didn't happen. And so you're now trying to figure that one out. But I love, that caught me off guard. Like, this is where the story surprised me. Like, go ahead.
Oh no! When I walked into the Zero Dawn, like before I got there, like I had it. It was percolating in the back of my head. Like it would be really cool and something I had never seen if they actually had all died and something else had happened to bring humanity back. Like that there wasn't a way to stop it, and so like it was. I mean, it was a great moment to find. Like yes. They really went there in the story.
Yeah. There was so I had the same, I had the same thing, and the game faked me out, because in the delve right before, in the story mission right before that, it suggested to me that, and I forget exactly what it was that was said, but it was like, oh, okay, they figured something out, and then something else went wrong, but they survived. I was like, oh no, they didn't. Oh wow.
Like, I think it's when you go into the mountain that you see all the sequences about the children that were created and nurtured by these...
Oh, in the Nora Mountain.
Yeah. The like...
The servitor AIs?
Yeah, and then you see, like, this giant classroom, and you're like, why didn't they train them? Like... What happened? Like, this doesn't make any sense. Did some programming go wrong with the servitors to where they never initiated the training program?
Why wasn't Apollo turned on?
Yeah, so...
Because
was there
fuck
malfunction?
Ted Pharaoh.
Because of the insecurity of a mediocre white man. Like, oh, fuck Ted Pharaoh.
No, he's the worst. Like, he's the worst.
A self-important person who could never allow himself to be slighted.
Who is responsible for the end of the world and still refuses to let...
Because he has to solve it himself.
Right.
He has to be the one to save it. Oh.
Like, that one really threw me for a loop. Like, are you kidding me?
And his thing, like, so he says several things there, but the root of it was that knowledge must be earned. That we can't just hand them, the keys to all this knowledge without, them having to go through the effort to earn it.
Because it worked out so well the first time.
That was the moment at which I started to like Silence a little bit more. Because at least Silence is better than that did.
Yeah, like, no, Ted's been the worst throughout this entire thing. And, like, there's this whole sequence where, I don't remember where it's at, but, like, it's an audio log where, I forget what character, because it was not somebody you're really introduced in well. It was, like, talking about how, you know, Ted's really starting to get, you know, inappropriate with her now that Elizabeth's gone.
Yeah, because Elizabeth always managed him.
Right. And then somebody says, Elizabeth always said, just keep Ted happy. I'm like, Jesus, this is a horrible idea.
Well, yeah, but then they're like, but Elizabeth fought with him all the time. And they're like, well, just keep him. The whole idea was keep him in the dark. He is a dangerous person if he knows anything.
So I just talked about a key plot point, and like, I feel like we should talk about this, is the fact that they get to the Zero Dawn facility, they seal themselves in, but one of the O-rings on one of the doors had a 10 millimeter gap instead of, like, less than a millimeter gap.
It wasn't even at the Zero Dawn facility. That was at, like, the Gaia, like, backup facility. That was where they were, like, making their last stand. Right.
Yeah, it was like Gaia Alpha, yeah.
So basically, like, the door seal didn't fully seal, and it was enough for the swarms to detect where the location was. And everyone's there sitting and bickering about who's going to go outside, because it has to be sealed from outside. And while they're bickering, Elizabeth goes outside and seals it, and also seals her fate.
Well, yeah, while they're bickering, she had already done the thing that needed to be done.
Yep, because it had to be done.
And it's just, like, you're going through this story, and you're experiencing this, and it's a gut punch. Even though you know that these are people who've been dead for however many, you know, thousands of years. It's a gut punch. But it's also, you're experiencing it with Aloy, who...
has her own opinions.
Right, and it's also a gut punch for her. And so it's like, it's really this sort of doubly emotional moment, because you're attached to this character who sacrificed herself, but also you're seeing it through the lens of Aloy, who this is essentially her mother. And she's just learning about her for the first time and learning that she exists for the first time, and then seeing how she died. I mean, it was really an emotional moment for me.
Well, and you could see, like, she was building hope that maybe, like, somehow she figured out a way to survive, and then no.
But Aloy is the genetic copy of Elizabeth Sobek, and so she is constantly the one who's just going out and doing things. Like, it is such a good explanation to why Aloy is a video game protagonist. Because she is the one who is, she's just there to go out and do stuff. Like, it's on her because no one else could. Or no one else will.
Right, exactly. Like, no one else is willing to do these things. Or they have some mumbo-jumbo superstitious reason not to. I thought the whole, like, Sun Karja and Shadow Karja thing was interesting. Because it took me forever to figure out, like, that these really were, like, splinter groups of the same thing.
Oh, yeah. It was, like, people who were still loyal to the old, like, Mad King.
Right. But I had encountered the Shadow Karja well before I made it to Meridian.
Ah.
And I'm like, I have no idea what the difference is between the Karja that don't attack me and the Karja that do. So, like, every time I rolled up on Karja anything, I was scanning them to see if they were hostile. Because I didn't know what the difference was.
That's kind of funny.
I mean, like, I had made it, like, well past Meridian without actually going to Meridian. Because I was like, well, if I go to Meridian, the story will advance, and I don't know if I want to do that yet.
So speaking of that, so there's we talked about this a little bit this week, but there's a point close to the end of the game, I guess, like before one of the last sort of delve type things, where it's like, okay, go to this place, and it's protected by all these machines, and it's this really awesome sequence where you're climbing this mountain, and there's all these machines, and it culminates in this gigantic battle, and then you've like earned the payoff of like going to, I think that was the Gaia Prime whatever facility. And because I was wandering around and exploring and doing everything else first, I basically ran into that set piece way before I could enter that zone.
Ooh.
So, like, I climbed the mountain and I fought all the machines and I killed that stupid bird. And it was like, it felt like it was amazing, right? Like, it was cool. But then, like, I get to the top and then I climb up those things and, like, there's a ledge that I can't get to because that part of the story isn't open yet. And it just felt really bad. Like that was like one of the things in the game that disappointed me the most, because most of the time, like, you can wander around and do a lot and it doesn't matter that much where you are in the story, and you're not really going to mess yourself up. There's very few places where that can happen. But man, because it had that great setup and that, you know, those series of fights, it was a letdown when I got to the top and I couldn't do anything there, and then it was a letdown again because when I got there in the story, it was like, go up this mountain, and I ran up the mountain and ran straight to the thing, and there were no fights and there's nothing in my way because I had already killed it all. So
and
like,
it didn't respawn?
No, like, I think some of the like smaller machines might have respawned, but like that big fight, no, I didn't have that. So it was just like sad.
The weirdest thing for me is, like, I had wandered around the map. I had unlocked all of the tall necks. So by the time I actually buckled down and started doing story missions, like, I had every campfire for the most part along the major paths unlocked. I could just teleport back and forth across the map. So like the last little bit of the story went super fast because, like, I wasn't having to spend any time traveling.
I bipped across the map like crazy.
I mostly went on foot until I got kind of close to the end, but when it sent me, actually not even that close to the end, I guess, but when it told me to go back to the Norlands, I thought, oh, this is going to be close to the end, so I better go there on foot and like relive my travels by just like seeing everything instead of fast traveling.
It was a little spoilery using the camp method because, like, there were certain ones that they wouldn't let you teleport to.
Oh.
You had to teleport to one near there and then walk from there because there was some kind of triggered event. Like the Norlands ones, you couldn't teleport right up to whatever Gaia's Embrace or.
I was
whatever.
Wondering about that.
No,
like, it makes sense.
You had to move in from like a midpoint way through the Sacred Lands because it kept saying like this camp's not available. This camp's also not available. But there were several times where that happened to me where, like, I could teleport there in theory, but it wouldn't let me.
I did experience that when it sent you back to the Nora. The closest you could get is the first one outside of the Embrace Gate, which was kind of a bit of a spoiler. Like, maybe they're going to make me walk through this gate and see something happen.
Yup. There's so many moments where you were set up and fed incomplete information by unreliable narrators that make the eventual payoff so nice. Like, I mean, the first time you find out there is this thing called Hades that is controlling these things, you're like, well, that's weird. And then you think, oh, okay, well, there was Gaia, and maybe Gaia and Hades, and sure enough, it pays off, and there's this whole sequence of, you know, God-named structures.
But Gaia is a Titan.
I mean,
Gaia should be what came before.
Gaia is supposed to be in charge.
Yeah.
She's supposed to be greater than, except doesn't quite work out that way.
Now, so what was that also because of Ted?
No.
Yes.
Was
Wait,
it?
well, I don't I don't know. I know Apollo got wiped because of Ted.
I mean, Hades, like
Hades
the
is
idea.
different. Like it's explained in both text and in a voice log inside the Zero Dawn facility.
Yeah, he's
Basically, Hades had to be adjusted so that the control was just right, so that it could take over from Gaia in case things went horribly wrong.
Right, but so there's a whole sequence of I don't know if they're audio logs or if they're text logs that are in the same line as when that lady talks about Ted being inappropriate. It's the same person, and they're talking about how Ted is obsessed with Hades. So like I got the impression that maybe he did screw with Hades and get Hades to take over. Because not only did he want to make them start over at square one knowledge-wise, I think he wanted to make them start over ecosystem-wise. But like, this is me just piecing things together. I got the impression that like Ted was obsessed with Hades. And maybe I just want to blame everything on Ted because he's horrible.
I mean, it's a valid desire because he's awful.
Because somebody
is the worst.
Like, we don't know who woke Hades.
I mean, we have suspicions. There are also, in addition to everything else, there was a spacecraft full of rich people who escaped the planet.
Okay, so this is the thing that bothers me about this sci-fi timeline, is if they have the technology to do wild, far-reaching terraforming, it just seems weird that go find a planet and terraform it wasn't the immediate thought process.
I think the problem was they didn't have the space travel, or they didn't know that they had the terraforming solutions.
Yeah, I mean, they built most of that stuff from scratch in the year and a half or so that they had.
There was that group. There was a whole...
The Odyssey project?
Yeah, the whole Odyssey project was exactly that. Like, that was the big... There was a whole big arc, which was, like, we're doing Zero Dawn, and the Odyssey project was a split off from... I think it was a split off from the Zero Dawn project, where they were like, no, we see what you're doing with all of your technology, and you need some of our technology, and we're, like, in orbit or whatever, but... we think we're done. We're going to go use this tech to terraform another planet and go somewhere else. And then they lost contact.
Okay.
Yeah, I was going to say, I thought the Odyssey failed.
The Odyssey vanished.
Right. They don't know for sure what happened.
Man, okay, so let's talk a little bit about the Zero Dawn facility. And so basically they gathered up all of these scientific minds and brought them to the facility. And once there, they had like one of two options. Either join the project or become euthanized. Basically, those were your options.
Or be
detained. Yeah. It's like, that's a little crazy. Like, I mean, I get it, but...
Desperate
it's the end of
times.
the world.
Yeah. And there were people that took different options. Like, not everybody was like, I'm going to work on this. But, like, that's kind of hardcore. Like, this gets back to what Kodra was talking about, where there's, like, social commentary here. Aplenty.
I mean, the name of the military campaign is also social commentary.
Oh, yeah. Not subtle social commentary either.
But I loved how the game told all these different smaller stories through the various logs and things that you find. And especially, so did everybody see all the vantage points?
Yes, most of them.
No,
So-
I
No.
did not.
So that was another whole little story arc, and I didn't really quite get it when I first started like finding them. But of course, like I wanted to go find all of them because they were a thing on the map, and I had to go there. But it turns out that like Vantage was actually like this piece of tech that was supposed to be like an archive of your memories that will last for however, forever, because it's this really great device that, the data won't decay and it'll last, forever. And so there's this guy who had a messed up kind of life, and he was involved, I guess, with the company that made this stuff, and he went on his end of the world tour and just was like traveling to places that he knew when he was growing up and sort of talking to his mother who had passed away and kind of reliving the story of his life and also giving some commentary about what was happening in the world. It was just like another little perspective and another whole little thread of a person who, lived through that time. I really enjoyed it.
I really liked that guy. Like, I mean, I felt terrible for him.
Yeah.
But I loved his story. I didn't see all of it, but it made me wish I had gone back to
Apocalyptic Storm Day 4.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know, like, I feel at this point that the Horizon setting may have now dethroned Fallout as my favorite post-apocalyptic universe.
It really did.
I mean, for me, it is by far, because I love the idea of a post-apocalyptic setting that doesn't look like a festering shithole.
Yes.
Like, there's stuff, there's living things, there's people going about their lives. It's just not the same people that were there before.
It's also one of those things where I think this is relevant to, like, more modern anxieties. Like, nuclear weapons are still definitely a scary thing that could end the world, but I could also definitely see some unregulated use of AI and robotics also ending the world. Like, that didn't seem like a stretch to me.
I mean, this is basically the modern version of Skynet played out. Because it's the same like kind of anxiety.
It's a macro version of the Grey Goose scenario.
Yeah.
And it's a nice distinction because it allows this story to happen. Like, in a true Grey Goose scenario, you can't really even do what they did here.
Like, ooh, this also has the best explanation for why are there robot dinosaurs.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Like, one of my favorite sequences in this game is when Elizabeth explains that in order to have the appropriate nurturing instincts, that Gaia is going to have to learn how to feel. And there's a whole sequence of things that are related to Gaia having feeling. And one of them is that she's learning about, basically the extinction of the dinosaurs and how it makes her sad. And she doesn't like that all these giant, creatures died out and, are no longer around. And that she wants to do something about this.
Which is why we have robot dinosaurs in this game.
That's why we have tall necks and thunder jaws and I thought it was really cool that like the robot dinosaurs weren't necessarily evil. They were just how Gaia was affecting change on the world. Like that
they had functions, and before the event that woke up Hades, they mostly did their own thing. I mean, that's one of the early plot points, is that the machines didn't used to be so angry.
Yeah.
But they seem to get angry roughly when this is why I'm sure people thought of Aloy as like a curse, because they became angry when she was born under mysterious circumstances.
Well, and immediately after, like, some giant explosion event in the distance that like everyone was talking about apparently.
Oh man, my heart was breaking when like everyone in the Nora started worshiping Aloy.
Oh god.
Oh man.
That was brutal.
Because she like after all of this, she gets the Alpha Registry restored. She goes into the mountain. She finds out that she is like Gaia's recreation of Elizabeth Sobek to stop Hades from destroying the world again. And that Gaia's dying wish was to recreate Elizabeth Sobek's DNA and that's who Aloy is. And she comes out, and everyone from the Nora who has shunned her forever starts like worshiping her and calling her the Anointed One. And it like she is just, her voice is so. This is like the most emotional you see her get in this entire game, is her vehemently rejecting their praise. Like, you rejected me for years, and now you want me to be your savior. Now you want
kindly go fuck yourselves.
It's like all she wants is a family, and they consistently deny her that.
It's why one of the things I liked the best about doing the hunting lodge quest was that the the hawk that you're working with, she's great, and she has this conversation, oh, Aloy of the Nora, and Aloy's like, no, it's more like despite the Nora.
Yeah, Aloy in spite of the Nora.
Right. And it's such a great apt title, because on outside of the Sacred Lands, everyone just sees her as that Nora girl, and she just doesn't feel like she is part of the Nora at all.
So, okay, we never really encountered the Banuk, however you pronounce that. I heard it once and then forgot immediately how you're supposed to pronounce it.
So the Banuk.
That's the topic of the DLC, I believe.
Yeah,
right.
There are some. Like, if you do all the side quests, there's one dude who has visions because he drinks machine blood. And that's fun. That's a fun guy. Yeah, machine blood being oil. And there's also a really cool side quest with a bunch of Banuk who actually have tame machines.
So, like, I wonder if Silence is Banuk, just because of the way he dresses versus like the Banuk armor that's available in game.
I don't know.
Like, it feels wrong to ascribe any allegiance to Silence.
Really?
Yeah, but he had to come from somewhere.
Yeah, I get that. So interesting, the Banuk are going to be the DLC. I was wondering if we were going to have like Silence off doing awful things.
I mean, I'm assuming that might come into it too, although that might be the next game, if there is such a thing.
Because the game ends with Silence making getting ready to do some bad decisions.
But before that, you're treated to this really awesome scene of Aloy. And so when Elizabeth, makes the sacrifice and locks herself out of the Gaia compound, the last thing she says is that she's tired and she wants to go home, or something to that effect. And apparently she did in fact survive long enough to actually literally go home.
Oh, man, yeah.
And Aloy finds her sitting there at what I guess was her family ranch, just sitting on a bench. Or was it a bench or up against a rock wall? Or
a bench.
Yeah. So, and it looked like Gaia had specifically planted things.
So that's the same flower representation. That's the same flower pattern around all of the metal flowers.
Yeah.
Right.
And presumably those are all Gaia.
Yeah.
And her poetry, which was actually really cool.
Yeah,
that was really cool. I like that a lot.
A series of haikus, and then a series of sonnets, and then, yeah, I love it.
So, yeah, let's talk about the Silence thing.
What a douchebag.
So during the sequence of events, you get this master control code. And Silence is like, here, I have everything ready for you to mount it. Why don't you mount it to my lance? And I'm thinking, okay, he's maybe being useful. And at the time, I didn't think anything about it. I am guessing something in that lance itself is a transmitter, because you use this lance to put the kill code, and you shut things down, and you cleanse all the machines in the planet. Or at least within, transmit distance of the spire. And then you find out that Hades wasn't killed and gets transmitted across whatever distance to wherever Silence is at where he captures it in some device.
Captures it in what looks like a lamp.
Yeah, like it looks like a lantern. So I'm guessing something in that lance was rigged to do all of this. Because,
Probably.
of course, Silence is asshole Yoda, but he's really not Yoda. He's not good.
Well, I feel like in some ways, part of what makes him so awful is that he wants to be the wise one that everyone listens to. He's like obsessed with it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he's chasing knowledge and is willing to trade anything for it.
Yes. Which is Aloy's constant problem with him.
I mean, he traded anything left of his humanity for another taste of knowledge.
And it's this weirdly sympathetic antagonist, right? Like, I don't know, as someone who values knowledge probably pretty excessively, like, you sympathize with that even though you know, like, oh no, that is so wrong, don't you dare. But at the same time...
And he does this stuff all through the game where, like, he's mad at Aloy for how easy the knowledge is coming to her. And, like, almost wants her to apologize. And there's a couple times where that, like, stuff is talked about just like that for how easy it was and how hard it was for him to figure out what he knows.
And I mean, I can't even imagine, for either of them, but I mean, if you spent your whole life, like, trying to learn the secrets of the machines and figure out what the heck is going on in the world, and then to find out that
you're just not the right person.
Well, that you're not the right person and someone else could just walk in and take all of that, but B, to find out that all of history, all of knowledge, all of math and science could have been there for you and should have been and was supposed to have been, but some asshole pressed a button and got rid of it. Like, I can't even imagine how much rage I would have if I found that out.
Oh, yeah.
Ted Faro is the worst.
Really the worst.
But, yeah, like, I sympathize with Silence in a lot of ways.
Oh, I don't.
I did until the end.
I understand Silence, but by the end, no.
I sympathize with him up to a point, but yeah, what he does at the end is not acceptable.
Keeping Hades alive is unacceptable.
Well, that he found out all of the truth that he spent his life wanting to find out, and then doubled down on it.
Well, he says that. Like, there's a sequence of events where you can talk to him. And he says, like, even knowing what I know now, I wouldn't have done anything different. And I might have just come up with better safeguards.
Yup, and that's the unforgivable shit. Nope. He better hope I don't get to catch up with him in the expansion or the sequel.
Well, and the other thing is, like, okay, so the event happened that decoupled Gaia from all of the helper constructs. Like, are we going to see those become self-aware as well also?
So one of the things that it said, or the impression that I got, is that, like, those, when Gaia became decoupled from those other subroutines, that they all basically became sort of self-sufficient, and then they left. So that's sort of this other mystery. But, like, my impression of it is that potentially we might run into some of these things down the road. Hades was one of them, and it was the most powerful and most autonomous of them to start with. But that maybe those other ones, other than Apollo, I guess, might still be around.
I'm curious where this game would go in a sequel.
Oh man, I know exactly where it goes in the sequel.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it has to be a very different type of game, because a lot of this game was solving the mystery.
What's up, Odyssey Project?
Oh yeah, I guess. If the Odyssey Project comes back, that could be interesting.
I mean, they hinted that in not subtle ways.
I mean, I did think it was interesting that basically, like, all of these children that they raised inside of, a tiny little room were basically thrown out into the wilds to go fend for themselves without really knowing how to fend for themselves because they ran out of food. And I guess all of the tribes that exist now, are descendant from however many kids those were.
At least those
Well,
Nora. No. There were
There's
multiple.
more.
Yeah, there were multiple cradles.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
I think they set them up all over the world.
Yeah, they did.
And so I guess the idea is just that maybe things went on too long before they could release the humans, and B, that may have had to be restarted multiple times, so it took longer than expected. So there just weren't the resources, and of course they didn't have the Apollo to teach them how to do any of it for themselves.
That cradle was heartbreaking.
Yeah, it was.
Yep.
Just wandering around in that thing,
And you could tell that the caretakers were not prepared to deal with adolescents or teenagers, and they were still trying to apply the same things that would work with 6-year-olds.
Yeah.
Why don't you jump around and blow off some steam?
I think that was just the program was broken.
Yeah, they hadn't been taught at all either. That I think was the idea, was that they were all pent up because they were supposed to be getting taught this really rigorous crash course education, but there was no one to teach because Apollo was gone.
Yeah, because they had the caretakers could teach to a point. Was what I understood, but then you get to third or fourth grade education, and that's where it ends.
Well, and they didn't even give them the focuses, and the focuses themselves would have been able to at least help a little bit.
I want to focus in real life so bad.
I'm ready for that technology. It will be a while. I feel like Google Glass set that back by a lot. I don't know. I said this earlier today, and I feel like that this game is almost worth the purchase of a PlayStation just to play this one game. Even if you're not going to play anything else. Just this one game. Kind of like Xbox with the Halo box. I feel like Horizon Zero Dawn is of equal goodness.
And this is by far one of my favorite games of all time.
I'm just really interested to see where they go. I'm super interested to find out what happens with the DLC, and more than anything, where they pick it up at. Is this just a side mission to the main game, or is this literally a continuation of the game?
Man, there's so many different places that this game could go in really interesting ways. You could flash forward 100 years real easy. What does this world look like in 100 years? You can do the sequel where Aloy hunts down Sylens and murders him. You could do a thousands of years prequel. You could do a not terribly long prequel, depending on what systems you wanted to build. You want to build come up with your tribe? I mean, it's very Fallout feeling, but it'd be really interesting.
There are just so many cool visuals in this game. I really liked the sequence when the Spire started awakening all of the old war machines and the various people that were just doing normal things when the ground started to shake and a horrible machine rose up from it.
I just really liked a lot of the really small stories and side characters. A lot of these people were really fleshed out well, or at least there were interesting points to think about in the messages that they left behind.
I know he's a dick. I kind of found all of Travis Tate's stuff pretty funny.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
He was extremely nihilistic.
Man, I kept expecting him to go, all right.
That does seem like it would have been in character for him.
He was very Matthew McConaughey to me. I just want to take a minute to talk about the sound design of this game. It is so good. There's so many little things that either add to the tension of the environment or big swells of music when you crest a hill, not a hilltop, but a cliff. There's just so much going on in the background, and it took me a while to really notice how much was just part of the ambient soundtrack and not necessarily sound cues. Like, there's just weird stuff going on in the soundtrack, even when nothing else is going on. And it kind of, like, lends an air of unease to everything you're doing.
I actually really enjoyed all of the, what was it? The sound cues Aloy would give you.
Yeah.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
oh, good. Oh, there's a... Better get off this platform. Because there can be a lot of stuff going on, and it can be easy to avoid that, to miss some of it, and she will let you know if there's something you need to be aware of.
Yeah, I thought that was really cool.
Or, like, you're scanning something, and she reminds you, oh, we don't know how to override this yet.
Yep.
Yeah. I appreciate those kinds of audio cues, especially because she's really chill about them.
Yeah, it doesn't devolve into an annoying, hey, you should be doing this, hey, you should be doing this, hey.
Yeah.
It's pretty chill. And the game trusts you enough that it doesn't constantly remind you about things.
Yep.
I mean, I know we talked about this a lot in the Games of the Year show, but I still really like the traversal system in this game. How you move around and how, in truth, it's almost guaranteed success with a few tense moments, but it feels really cool.
What do you
like
mean?
when you're scaling up the side of a mountain.
Oh,
and
yeah.
You're technically just going from marker to marker to marker, and it's really like there's times where you can absolutely screw up, because I did, but for the most part, like, once you're on the path, you're on the path. But it feels super cool when you do it.
Yeah, I love that. Like, the moment that I realized, like, oh, hey, I am going to be able to do things like get to the top of this tall neck and not waste 3 hours of my life because I am bad at jumping puzzles. Like, that was a revelation. Like, I would almost certainly have incredibly different feelings about this game. As much as I love the story and a lot of things about the gameplay, if you had to actually have a significant amount of skill to do all of the jumping and climbing in this game, I'm not sure I would have finished it. I certainly wouldn't have been as much of a completionist as I was. I mean, and I get that some people like that, and it probably sucks to feel like you don't actually have that much control. But
Well,
man, it was a great thing for me. I am bad at that.
It feels like it skirts the line between what is essentially a QuickTime event and having to do it entirely on your own. Like, it's this weird happy medium between the two. And there's actually, like, several times where I found an alternate route instead of just probably the one I was supposed to take, because I end up taking the awkward ones. My only complaint was that sometimes the trail marking is really hard to see at night versus day. And by quirk of the day-night cycle, there were a couple times I arrived someplace in the dark of night and having to find my way up a mountain with, like, no light. It made me really wish that, like, the focus kind of illuminated the trail or something like that. Not marked the trail, but just, like, acted as a torch to where you could, like, use it and see where you were supposed to go, and then, you know, move after that once you were able to see where the slightly off-colored rock is. I mean, other than the death loop that Coder was talking about with the save game in the quarry, I felt like, for the most part, if I did take a death, it returned me to a pretty nearby place to where I didn't lose much time due to a death.
The only time that happened when I was the second Deathbringer, I want to say.
The first one that moves around.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah, I died.
Yeah, no,
that one.
I died a lot because I did not realize at first that
You need to get off that platform.
Yeah, exactly. I shouldn't be standing here, because I was like trying to snipe the guys, and then it would wake up and immediately send me to the floor. But even then, that wasn't too far. Like, you just had to run forward.
I'm just glad this wasn't like Kingdom Hearts where I had to watch the cutscene every time.
Yeah.
The really big, stompy battle robots, the ones that I was supposed to be really scared of. I forget what
You
they
mean the
were
ones you can
called.
shoot the weapons off of and kill them with them?
Yeah. There was the really big, slow, tons of guns walker. That's like a big square on legs.
The thing that looks like it's straight out of Binding Coil.
Maybe?
Right. Actually, it reminds me of the ones from from Alex 1. The weird ones that you have to split tank. Yeah.
Those things.
Yeah.
I was so prepared for those things to be super hard and crazy strong, and they just like fell over against me continually. There were way harder things like
the only one that I had trouble with was the last one you fight. And not that I had trouble with, it's just because all that other shit kept spawning in, and I'd have to deal with it while also dodging the big guy. But that one, as compared to the others we had fought, that one felt a little bit more bullet spongy than the early ones, because the early ones just like fell over.
Yeah.
Like you knocked the guns off, and then it was almost dead at that point, so you just had to land a couple good shots to push it over.
The hardest two fights for me were the Rockbreaker in the quarry and then the Thunderjaw in the cauldron, because there is not enough space to deal with that thing. I answered that by laying down a lot of traps before that fight starts.
Yeah, I mean, after the first cauldron, I was like, oh, now I'm in this room, and I'm going to put down all of the traps before I release the thing in the middle. So like, all the rest of the cauldrons.
I tell you a mob that I still hate fighting. The bellowback things. The giant fire beetle, frost beetle, whatever. I think they're beetles. That's what they remind me of.
I think they look like hippos.
Maybe. That might make more sense.
But
like,
I don't know why they have a giant thing of fire on their back.
I don't know. They're annoying, and I think it's the tramplers, the really big things that just want to charge at you all the time. I find them annoying. But the rock breakers, though, I mean, I still think are the ones that bug me the most. I mean, and you do encounter them in the wild, and I've run from several of them before just because I didn't want to fight them. They're like all over that desert region.
If you manage to shoot off their claws, they're only above the ground forever and shooting rocks at you.
So there were a couple times where like I took the melee ability where a strong strike knocks things down, and there were a couple times where like it would surface and it would wait a little bit before going back under. And what I would do is I would knock it down, and it would get basically flipped on its back and wouldn't burrow for a while, and then I'd finish it off there. I probably used melee abilities way more than anyone else.
I like that there were multiple
I find that
answers
highly
to the
unlikely.
question.
I used the hell out of melee abilities. I mean, there were several sections of the game where I hid in the weeds and then silent striked the mob and killed it. And then went to the next one and silent striked and killed it.
Bell, it sounds like you were playing this game stealthily.
Yes, I was. I actually was playing this game.
That's why I have
game
to say
stealthily.
that seems highly unlikely, because my lack of a tolerance for stealth games meant that I mostly didn't.
I mean, like, once I was seen, it was on, and I was, doing
I'm just
normal...
saying, Aloy's dodge roll is way better than what you get in several other games.
It's true.
Her avoidance of attacks is great.
So I could just, go toe-to-toe with lots of things, because I have a big, heavy spear, and it takes a while to wind up, but so does everything else. So...
And then you can get out.
Hit and run. Works on almost everything, except for things that have radial attacks, like shellbacks.
And flyers.
Doesn't work on flyers until you knock them down with a ropecaster. Ropecaster is amazing.
So I started this game very stealthily, and then I found that I didn't have the right answers to continue doing that, and then I became a ranged fiend and realized how much damage fire was.
See, I ended up staying pretty stealthy because I found the joy of corruption arrows, and there were not a lot of things that I couldn't kill by just hiding in the tall grass and corrupting stuff until it all killed each other.
So, towards the end of the game, I had the charmed indefinitely ability, and a lot of times I would hide in the weeds until I could charm something. Didn't matter what it was. And then it would go off and attack stuff and distract shit while I could run away and, like, go off to the objective. But, like, the only reason why I was really playing like that was because I felt definitely I was on a time crunch to beat the game before this show. Because I would have far rather fought all the dinosaurs and gotten all the loot. But I absolutely felt like it was faster for me to sparingly fight things.
I guess I also sort of reached a point where loot didn't seem to matter much anymore. Like, maybe you would get a mod that was a couple % better, but, like, after a point, it didn't feel very noticeable.
Well, I had already reached the point where if I didn't see a purple icon, I probably didn't need anything off of it. Because, like, I had an inventory full of purple mods just from killing big things. I'm honestly looking forward to going back and doing a lot of the stuff that I forced myself not to do for sake of time.
This game also sort of makes me excited to play Monster Hunters, and I'm hoping that I'm not going to be disappointed by Monster Hunter combat.
I feel like that depends on what you're looking for. Like, that it's really not the same thing.
I like fighting dinosaurs in this game. Like, I like picking off enemy weak points, like, in specific orders, because I know, like, I want to take away options from a monster. I always try and shoot off all 4 claws of a rock breaker because I don't want it going underground anymore.
For me, a lot of times I was knocking stuff off because, like, it felt like it would make it faster to kill the thing. Like, if I could take care of the thing that I was actually having to dodge, then I could just focus on burning it down quickly.
Mm-hmm.
I also love knocking the crates off of shellbacks.
That never
That's
stops
fun.
being funny.
No, that is never not a cool thing.
Well, I don't think I did that.
If you hit the crate from behind where it's blinking red, it'll knock it off.
It'll just
and
fly off.
And you get a crate full of loot.
Huh.
Most of the time it's just a lot of shards, but occasionally you can get, like, blue mods, purple mods. But, I mean, you have to be very careful because, you know, as soon as you alert them to doing this, they're all going to shield up. And then it's not as easy to knock the things off anymore. I love that the game allows you to approach fights vastly different depending upon whatever your favorite attack is.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was getting at earlier. Like, every problem, every fight has multiple solutions depending on what your playstyle is.
I appreciate the game let me be a sniper most of the time. Like, I didn't have to go toe-to-toe with things almost ever. Because I really didn't enjoy going toe-to-toe with things. Because I didn't really like those combat mechanics.
I can't aim for crap, so I appreciate that it let my spear do a lot of talking.
Yeah. I mean, and similarly, I was glad that I didn't have to use traps. Because I don't actually like setting traps and luring things into them, because I prefer to be more mobile than that. And, like, I'm more of an opportunist than somebody who sets up traps for enemies. And so it was kind of cool that even though it was a hunting game, I didn't need to do that particular thing.
I guess my thing was, like, every time I went to use traps, I over-trapped and never actually needed all of them. So
hey,
I just
if you have the
stopped
right skill,
using
you
them.
can just pick them back up.
Yeah, no, I finally got that towards the end. I finally got disarm trap, which is useful. So we're sort of slowing down in the comments. Any other major points that we really need to touch on before we kind of do some final thoughts?
I mean, I love this game. I love Aloy. Hopefully, if you're listening to this, you have already played it, but if for some reason you haven't, please play it.
Man, I just want to reiterate what I said at the beginning of the show, that basically, like, this is some of the most interesting sci-fi that I have experienced in any platform. and I am super looking forward to seeing more of this world.
So I was I was partially surprised when I saw that Aloy was voiced by Ashley Birch. But I mean, just because it didn't, like, Aloy sounds like Aloy. Aloy doesn't sound like Ash. And from, like, Hey Ash, What You Playin', or from any of our other voice acting work. She's a really good voice actor. Holy cow.
Yeah.
Like, she brings the emotion into Aloy's voices in all of the right ways. This is some of the best voice acting work I've heard in a while.
I mean, and this game is like a real roller coaster of emotions. Like, I had lots of different and varied kinds of feels while playing this game.
I really appreciate that this game both made me laugh out loud on more than one occasion and moved me to tears on more than one occasion. Like, it has a really broad emotional palette, which I'm looking for more and more in games.
And I think part of it's that a lot of the characters were truly three-dimensional. There weren't many just one attribute characters. You saw different subtle slices of the same character from different perspectives. I mean, and no one was really like, melodramatically evil. Everyone had reasons for being who they were.
Even if who they were was a giant asshole.
Yup. I mean, I definitely feel like this is a must-play game.
I think this game is important. Like, I think this game is important in the way that, like, Half-Life was important, like Portal was important. I want to think of a non-Valve game. Final Fantasy 6 or 7.
Ocarina of Time.
Metal Gear Solid.
Like, important to have played?
They're just... All of these games are games that are really relevant and really significantly shape the games that follow.
Mm-hmm.
So I threw out Ocarina of Time, but there were absolutely aspects of this game that made me have, like, Zelda-ish undertones. And namely, the cauldrons reminded me of Zelda temples.
Yeah, I mean, it's got some really clear inspiration from previous things, from previous games. I feel like this is one of the only open world games where I have enjoyed the story start to finish. Or, well, close to the start to finish. Because I feel like there's a lot of open world games that don't really know how to end, and I felt like the ending of this was perfect.
Well, to be fair, like, a lot of the Bethesda games suffer from this, of not having the strongest endings, where the game just kind of truncates at some point instead of really meaningfully ending.
Yeah, and Assassin's Creed has a similar problem. But, like, I think this is going to be a game that people look back on a decade from now and are like... I mean, the way we look back at some of those games is like, oh, wow, you've never heard of that? Like, oh, you got to see this.
I mean, and I feel like what makes this all the more impressive is the fact that this is brand new IP, and it is already this rich and textured world.
This is a game that is a middle finger to all of the established marketing, like, everyone knows tenets of the last 10 years. Like, it's brand new IP with a female protagonist in a sci-fi setting.
In a post-apocalyptic game that isn't, green tone bleak.
Yeah.
I want more protagonists like Aloy.
Yes, please.
Any more final thoughts?
I beat the game at level 34.
So you've been continuing on while we talked?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I think I was 35, maybe 36. So I guess you and I were on a similar trajectory. So I guess let's talk about the next game of the month.
The next game of the month. The next game of the month is Mighty Number 9 because I don't like any of you. Have fun.
Aww.
I'm kidding. The next game of the month is Divinity Original Sin 2. This is a Kickstarted sequel to Divinity Original Sin, which is the fifth game in the Divinity series.
Game, I think, yeah. It's a really contorted series.
Its timelines are a little weird. This game is basically a sequel to Divine Divinity, which was the first game, but you really don't need to know that. It also sort of pretends Beyond Divinity doesn't exist. So there's that.
Interesting.
Anyway, this is a mostly turn-based tactical RPG-ish thing, except without, a grid, where systems are kind of interesting. BioWare RPGs make this big deal about choice mattering and things, and sometimes it does and sometimes it doesn't. For the most part, Divinity lets you solve problems in whatever way you choose.
Sometimes these ways are hilarious. I'm really excited about Divinity Original Sin 2, because it clears up a thing that I really wanted to do in the original and couldn't. Like, I don't like running around as my character and a party and an additional other character while playing with somebody who is doing the same thing. Like, I like to control just one character if I'm playing multiplayer. And having up to 4-person drop in, drop out multiplayer is super exciting to me.
Yeah, the original the first Divinity Original Sin had 2-player. This one has up to 4-player. The player characters, you can either make a custom one or you can choose a origin, and they are fairly interesting, and those come with their own goals and motivations, and sometimes they're in conflict with each other, which is weird. But I think it'll probably be a pretty fun ride, and we'll definitely see how it goes in about a month.
Yup. I think a lot of us have already started playing. Anyway, hopefully you enjoyed the show, and this is definitely one of those situations where I think we would all love to hear from listeners with their thoughts on Horizon Zero Dawn. I mean, I've never heard anyone say that they hate the game, so I think it's pretty universally accepted, if not cherished. But it'd definitely be interesting to hear what some thoughts are about the game in general. Anyway, we will see you again next week, and good night.
Good night.
Good
See
night.
ya.